Welcome, listeners, to the Sleepy Storyteller channel. I'm Silas, your sleepy storyteller, pulling you down the rabbit hole of time, one slow step at a time. If you like listening to these videos, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe with notifications on so you can continue your sleepy journey through history. Also, please comment the city you live in and the time it is where you are. It's always great to see where you all embark on your sleepy journey from. Now, take a moment to find a comfortable resting position. Close your eyes gently, and in your own time, allow yourself to sink into the quiet atmosphere of the past as we begin our slow journey together. Tonight, we're stepping back to the 1770s to embark on a quiet walk through Edinburgh during the Enlightenment. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the heavy clouds, I stepped out onto the historic heart of Edinburgh, the Royal Mile. A thick Scottish mist, born of the damp air and the lingering coolness of the night, hung low and heavy over the city. It clung to the towering tenements, softening their harsh stone edges and blurring the distant outlines of the castle at one end and Holyrood Palace at the other. My breath plumed faintly in the chilly air, a small, visible cloud in a world of gray. The street itself, paved with worn cobblestones, was almost silent. Later, it would be a vibrant, chaotic artery of city life. But for now, it belonged to the ghosts of the past and the few early risers. Each of my footsteps was muffled by the mist, creating a sense of solitude, as if I were the only soul awake in this ancient, sleeping city. The stones, slick with moisture, glistened faintly, reflecting the ghostly glow of the oil lamps that still flickered faintly in the distance. I pulled my cloak a little tighter, the wool a comforting barrier against the cold. The air carried the constant, defining scent of Auld Reekie, the smoke from countless peat and coal fires, a smell that had been part of Edinburgh for centuries. It mingled with the earthy scent of damp stone and the faint aroma of fresh bread from a baker's oven just beginning to stir. It was a smell that spoke of life, of constant activity, even in this quiet moment before dawn. My path led me along the high street, the main stretch of the Royal Mile. The tenements rose on either side, their 10, 12, even 14 stories reaching up towards the sky, their windows like silent, watchful eyes. These were the vertical communities of the old town, where the rich and poor lived stacked one on top of the other, sharing the same grand thoroughfare, but occupying vastly different worlds. In the dim light, the closes, the narrow, mysterious alleyways that disappeared between the buildings, appeared as dark, gaping mouths, full of secrets and untold stories. I imagined the lives stirring within them, the philosophers in their attic rooms, the merchants on the lower floors, and the families in between, all connected by the stone staircases and the bustling life of the Royal Mile. I paused for a moment, listening. The city was slowly awakening. A distant bell chimed the hour. A rooster crowed from some hidden courtyard. The faint, high-pitched cry of a milkmaid was carried on the breeze, still far away. These were the ordinary sounds of a city coming to life, and in this quiet moment, they were a profound comfort. The grand stone facades, with their ornate carvings and intricate windows, were softened by the mist, their details blurred into a more gentle, unified whole. The statues and monuments, typically proud and imposing, seemed to recede into the gray, their heroic postures muted, their gazes lost in the swirling vapor. The feeling of history was overwhelming here, not in a grand, didactic way, but in a visceral sense. These were the stones that had witnessed centuries of Scottish life, from royal processions and religious reforms to bloody battles and intellectual awakenings. As I continued my walk, the mist began to thin, revealing more of the city's muted palette. The deep greens of the moss growing in the crevices of the stone, the soft yellows of a lit window, and the darker reds of a weathered door began to emerge against the receding gray. The sky above, though still overcast, promised a day, however uncertain. The quiet of the early morning on the Royal Mile was deceptive. It was a quiet born not just of sleep, but of anticipation. The city in the 1770s was a crucible of new ideas, and the energy of the Enlightenment, the philosophical debates, the scientific discoveries, the literary masterpieces, was a constant, vibrating undercurrent. I imagined the great minds of the era, the likes of David Hume and Adam Smith, walking these very streets, their thoughts shaping the world. Their presence felt palpable, a silent force pushing the city and its people towards a new future. This quiet walk was a journey into the heart of that transition, a moment suspended between the weight of history and the promise of tomorrow. In this misty morning on the Royal Mile, I simply walked, observing, listening, and breathing in the profound atmosphere of a city on the cusp of an intellectual revolution. Leaving the relative openness of the Royal Mile, my feet were drawn to one of the narrow, unlit passages that punctured its grand facade. These were the closes, the veins and arteries of the old town, mysterious and full of silent invitations. Stepping off the main thoroughfare, the world instantly changed. The sound of my own footsteps, once muffled, now echoed loudly off the towering stone walls that pressed in from both sides. The light, which had been pale and diffused on the high street, was now almost entirely blocked, leaving the close in a perpetual, shadowy gloom. The air here was different too. The fresh, damp chill of the morning gave way to a heavier, more complex atmosphere. It carried the earthy scent of wet stone, the sharp tang of refuse left from the night before, and the faint, sweet smell of a brewing mash from a hidden tavern. It was a smell that spoke of the close's raw, unfiltered humanity, a world a million miles away from the philosophical debates of the Enlightenment. I moved slowly and with care, the ground beneath my feet uneven and slick. The closes were not straight, deliberate paths. They twisted and turned, ascending and descending with the natural contours of the hill. Every corner revealed a new secret, a narrow, impossibly steep stone staircase climbing to a distant floor, a small wooden door with an iron knocker, a single, flickering candle in a window high above. The buildings here, so close they almost touched, created a vertical landscape of shared lives and private moments, all stacked on top of one another. I could feel the life stirring around me, even in the semi-darkness. The clatter of a distant bucket, the soft murmur of an argument from a window far above, the faint, high-pitched laughter of a child. These were the sounds of the close, a constant, living presence. They were not the grand, public sounds of the Royal Mile, but the intimate, private noises of daily existence. It was in these narrow passages that the true character of Edinburgh's Old Town resided, a vibrant, chaotic world hidden in plain sight. The closes served as more than just thoroughfares. They were communities in themselves. At their entrance, I might pass a small workshop, its doors slightly ajar, revealing the silhouette of a craftsman at work. Further in, a small tavern, its windows dark for now, promised warmth and company later in the day. Each close was its own little world, with its own specific sounds, smells, and secrets. They were places of profound contrast. A close might lead to a grand mansion in the back, while another was home to a notorious slum. As I walked, I kept my eyes focused on the details, the deep greens of moss growing in the crevices of the stone walls, the intricate ironwork of a gate that seemed to guard a private world, the worn texture of a wooden door that had seen centuries of use. These were the small, quiet details that told the story of the city, not through grand monuments, but through the silent endurance of everyday things. My journey through the close was a brief, humbling one. After several turns and a short descent down a flight of worn steps, I saw the end, a rectangle of pale gray light that promised a return to the open street. I took a deep breath, the air still heavy with the smells of the close, but now tinged with the familiar smoke of Auld Reekie and the chill of the morning. Stepping back onto the Royal Mile, the sudden change was disorienting. The space, the light, the volume of sound, it was all a profound shift. It was a reminder that Edinburgh was a city of stark contrasts, a place where enlightenment and squalor coexisted, where grand ideas were forged in close proximity to the daily struggles of life. The quiet walk through the close had been a journey into the city's profound depths, a glimpse into the raw, living heart of the old town. My quiet walk, having navigated the vertical world of the closes, now took me towards a different kind of heart within the old town, the seat of learning. The narrow streets, still damp from the morning mist, eventually gave way to a more open thoroughfare, leading to the hallowed ground of the University of Edinburgh. The air here felt subtly different, losing the chaotic scent of the close and gaining a crisp, slightly cerebral quality, as if tinged with the promise of ink and parchment. The University of Edinburgh in the 1770s was not the grand, singular edifice that would later be built. It was a collection of older, more humble buildings, some medieval, clustered together behind a series of stone walls and archways. Yet, in this quiet, early hour, the very ground seemed to hum with an intellectual energy. I walked past the sturdy stone pillars of a main entrance, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hands, and their carvings softened by centuries of rain and wind. They were not merely architectural features. They were silent sentinels, bearing witness to generations of students and scholars who had passed through to seek knowledge. The courtyard within was still and empty, the paving stones reflecting the pale gray light of the morning. I could almost hear the ghosts of conversations, passionate debates on moral philosophy, quiet discussions on scientific discovery, and boisterous arguments about the latest literary work. This was the crucible of the Scottish Enlightenment, a place where minds like Adam Smith, William Robertson, and Joseph Black had walked, taught, and debated. I imagine them striding across this very courtyard, their minds alight with the revolutionary ideas that were challenging the old world and forging a new one. The buildings themselves, with their small, mullioned windows and ancient stone facades, felt steeped in a profound sense of purpose. A few of the windows showed a faint light, indicating a scholar working late into the night, or an early student burning a lamp over a text. The scent of wood smoke was joined here by the faint, distinctive smell of an old library, a mix of aging paper, leather bindings, and a certain dusty quietude. It was a smell that spoke of the patient, solitary work that underpinned the city's great intellectual ferment. I paused to run my hand over the cool, rough surface of a stone wall, feeling the weight of its history. This was a place where reason was a tool, curiosity a virtue, and the pursuit of knowledge a shared passion. The quiet of the early morning was a profound contrast to the intellectual fervor that animated this institution. It was a stillness that was not empty, but full of latent potential, a silence that contained the echoes of 1,000 ideas waiting to be born. The academic world of the 1770s was a vibrant and close-knit one, and the university was its epicenter. Students from all over Scotland, and indeed from all over Europe, flocked here to learn from the great minds of the era. I could almost visualize them, young men with their eager faces, their books clutched tightly in their arms, hurrying to a lecture hall. This was a place where social class was less important than intellectual merit, a forward-thinking ideal that was revolutionary for its time. As I continued my walk, I passed a series of archways and smaller passages that led to the various colleges. Each felt like a portal to a different discipline, a place for medicine, for law, for the arts. The very architecture of the place seemed to reflect the breadth of human inquiry. There was a sense of order and purpose here, a deliberate design for the cultivation of thought. The light continued to grow brighter, chasing away the shadows and revealing more of the university's quiet dignity. The sound of a distant bell, perhaps calling students to an early class, finally broke the profound silence. It was a sound of routine, of a world continuing its essential work despite the political turmoil and social upheaval of the age. My journey past the pillars of the university was a humbling one. It was a walk through a place that was both deeply rooted in the past and yet, in its ideas, soaring towards the future. This quiet morning had been a profound encounter with the very mind of the Enlightenment, a silent pilgrimage through the halls where the future was being imagined, one thoughtful step at a time. Leaving the quiet, intellectual hum of the university behind, my walk led me back towards the more public thoroughfares, but with a different focus. The city was now fully awake, and the Royal Mile, though not yet at the chaotic peak of its day, was bustling with activity. It was here, in the heart of the old town, that a different kind of institution flourished, the coffee house. These establishments were more than just places to drink a fashionable new beverage. They were the informal universities of the Enlightenment, the public forums where ideas were debated, gossip was exchanged, and the pulse of the city was felt. I found myself pausing outside a well-known coffee house, its windows still misted over from the warmth and bustle within. The aroma of roasted beans, a rich and exotic scent, wafted out into the street, mingling with the familiar smell of wood smoke and damp stone. The sound was a low, constant murmur, a symphony of conversation, the clatter of porcelain cups and the rustle of newspapers being read. It was a sound that spoke of a city engaged in lively discussion, a stark contrast to the quiet solitude of my morning walk. I imagined what was happening inside. In these establishments, social distinctions often blurred. A famous professor from the university might be found arguing with a young, aspiring writer. A wealthy merchant might be listening intently to the latest news from America, while a surgeon discussed a new medical theory with a colleague. The coffee house was a melting pot of Edinburgh society, where ideas, like the strong brew itself, were potent and stimulating. It was a place where information traveled at the speed of conversation, a human network that was just as important as the libraries and lecture halls. I stood for a moment, observing the flow of people entering and exiting the establishment. The men, dressed in their dark woolen coats and tricorn hats, carried a certain intellectual air about them, even the most mundane looking. Their faces were often animated, their gestures broad, as if the very act of talking was a form of physical exercise. They were the minds of the Enlightenment, and the coffee house was their public stage. The air around the coffee house felt charged with a different kind of energy than that of the university. This was not the quiet, solitary work of a scholar over a book, but the messy, vibrant, and often boisterous process of a group mind at work. It was in these places that ideas, once conceived, were tested, refined, and spread. A new philosophical treatise might be read aloud, a recent scientific discovery discussed, or a political pamphlet critiqued. The coffee house was where abstract thought met the real world, a place where the theoretical became practical. As the sun began to break through the lingering clouds, casting a pale, weak light on the street, the activity at the coffee house seemed to intensify. More men gathered outside, standing in small, animated clusters, their conversation creating a constant background hum. I could almost hear the snippets of their talk. Words like reason, logic, liberty. These were the keywords of the era, the powerful ideas that were shaping not just Edinburgh, but the entire Western world. The quiet of my morning had been a journey into the city's bones, its streets, its closes, its institutions. But this glimpse of the coffee house was a journey into its very mind. It was a reminder that the Enlightenment was not a movement of solitary thinkers, but a collaborative, social enterprise. It was born not just in silent libraries, but in the noisy, smoke-filled rooms where men gathered to drink, to debate, and to dare to think new thoughts. My quiet walk had been anything but silent. It had been filled with the echoes of history, the sounds of life, and now the vibrant murmur of a city's intellect at play. The coffee house stood as a testament to this, a public beacon of a revolution, not of weapons, but of ideas. It was a humbling and inspiring sight, a place where a new world was being argued into existence, one cup of coffee at a time. My walk, having journeyed through the intellectual ferment of the coffee houses, now led me westward, the gentle ascent of the street, a constant, subtle reminder of the city's topography. The sky, now a bright, albeit cloudy, gray, seemed to open up as I neared the culmination of the Royal Mile. My destination, though I had seen its silhouette from the very beginning of my walk, was Edinburgh Castle. It stood upon its volcanic crag, a formidable and ancient sentinel, a silent testament to the city's tumultuous and royal past. The air here felt thinner, colder, and the wind, which had been a gentle breeze in the close, now gusted with a determined force, whipping at my cloak and carrying the distinct, sharp scent of stone and high elevation. The cobblestones, which had felt worn and familiar in the old town, here felt more purposeful, leading me directly towards the powerful rock on which the castle was built. This was not just a walk. It was a pilgrimage to the very heart of Scottish history. As I ascended onto the castle esplanade, the space opened up dramatically. The view was breathtaking, stretching across the city's rooftops to the Forth estuary and the hills beyond. But it was the castle itself that held my gaze. Its gray, impenetrable stone walls, its formidable ramparts and towers seemed to rise from the very rock, an organic extension of the land itself. The sight was a profound contrast to the intellectual revolution happening just below its feet. The castle represented the old world, the power of kings, the might of armies, the weight of a feudal past. The city below represented the new, the power of ideas, the might of reason, the promise of a forward-looking future. I stood for a moment, letting the strong wind buffet me, listening intently. The sounds of the city below, the clatter of carts, the cries of vendors, were faint and distant. Up here, the dominant sound was the wind, a mournful, constant whisper that seemed to carry the echoes of 1,000 years of history. I imagined the armies that had laid siege to these walls, the royal processions that had passed through its gates, and the prisoners who had looked out from its windows, their lives a stark counterpoint to the city's grand narrative. The castle was quiet today. Though it housed a garrison, there was no overt display of military might. A lone guard stood at the gate, his uniform a crisp, clean splash of color against the ancient stone. His presence was a reminder that the castle's purpose had shifted. It was no longer the active center of political power, but a military barracks, a ceremonial heart, and a potent symbol of Scotland's enduring identity. I moved closer to the great gatehouse, its heavy portcullis a permanent fixture, its stone arches bearing the marks of countless battles. I ran my hand over the cool, rough surface of the stone, feeling a profound connection to the generations who had done this home. The history here was not written in books, but etched into the very rock. visible in every crack, every worn edge. The castle's silence was not an empty one. It was a silence filled with the ghosts of the past, with the weight of memory. It was a place that felt both grand and lonely. A majestic sentinel watching over a city that was quickly outgrowing it. The echoes of the title were not a literal sound, but a feeling. A visceral sense of a glorious and often bloody history that still resonated in the air. A history that the city was now slowly and deliberately moving beyond. As the day progressed, the sky grew a little brighter, but the wind remained a constant, powerful presence. The view from the castle esplanade was a breathtaking testament to the city's unique geography and its profound historical depth. The ancient stronghold, standing proud and unyielding, watched over a city of philosophers, a city where the quiet power of an idea was beginning to supersede the old power of stone and steel. My journey here was a humbling end to the first part of my walk, a profound encounter with the enduring past that was the stage for a revolution of the mind. Leaving the high crag and the ancient stone of the castle, I began my descent back into the city, but with a new perspective. My journey had taken me from the raw power of the past to the bustling present of the coffee house. And now, my mind was full of a different kind of architecture, not of stone and mortar, but of thought. The wind, which had been a powerful physical presence at the castle, now felt like the very breath of change, carrying the weight of a new idea on its currents. The air here felt different. It was a subtle shift, but a profound one. It was no longer just the smell of damp stone and wood smoke, but something more. The faint, earthy tang of freshly turned earth, the sharp scent of cut timber, and the rhythmic, metallic sound of a hammer against stone. These were the sounds and smells of creation, not of decay or ancient endurance. They were the tangible evidence of the great intellectual revolution taking place. A revolution that was now building itself a new home. I found myself walking towards the city's northern edge, the path taking me out of the narrow, winding streets of the old town. The clutter and chaos of the closes, the vertical world of stacked lives, were giving way to something new. The straight lines and open spaces of the new town. This was the physical manifestation of the ideas that had been debated in the coffee houses and taught at the university. This was the Enlightenment made real. The old world was being left behind, and a new one was being carefully, deliberately constructed. I watched a group of stonemasons at work, their hands a blur of practiced motion as they shaped the beautiful golden stone that would form a new building. Their work was not just manual labor, it was a physical embodiment of a philosophical shift. They were building a city not for a king or a clan, but for a new kind of society, one built on the principles of reason, order, and progress. I could feel the energy of their work, the quiet, persistent effort of a city trying to reinvent itself. The air, though cool, felt optimistic. The ideas of the Enlightenment were not a whispered secret. They were a loud, public conversation. They were in the straight lines of the new streets, in the elegant symmetry of the new squares, and in the grand, sweeping vistas that the new town was being designed to provide. This was a city built on a principle, not just on a hill. It was a conscious effort to create a world that was more rational, more beautiful, and more humane. I noticed a couple walking nearby, their conversation animated, their faces full of a quiet hope. They were not talking about the old world, the clan feuds, or the religious strife of the past. Their conversation was about the future, about the new bridge that would connect the old and new towns, about the new ideas in science and philosophy, and about the prospect of a world built on logic and compassion. Their conversation was a reflection of the profound change that was taking place, a shift in mindset that was as powerful as any physical construction. My walk had now brought me to a place where I could see the profound contrast between the two cities. The towering vertical world of the old town, with its ancient stone and chaotic closes, stood in stark relief against the clean, horizontal lines of the new town, with its broad avenues and open spaces. It was a visual metaphor for the weight of a new idea. The past was a beautiful but heavy burden, and the future was an elegant, if still uncertain, promise. The sun, now higher in the sky, broke through the clouds, casting a warm, golden light on the freshly cut stone. The sight was breathtaking. The very stone of the city seemed to be infused with the glow of a new day, a new age. The quiet walk, which had begun in the misty solitude of the past, was now a journey into a bright, hopeful future, a silent pilgrimage through a city being reborn. My feet, having now left the sounds of construction behind, carried me deeper into the realized vision of the new town. The transition was profound, like stepping from a historical archive into a brightly lit, modern drawing room. The streets here were broad, straight, and meticulously planned, a stark and elegant contrast to the chaotic, winding passages of the old town. The air, no longer heavy with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, was crisper and cleaner, carrying only the fresh, subtle fragrance of stone and the new, green lawns of the public squares. I walked down one of these wide avenues, feeling a sense of space and order that was utterly new to me. The cobblestones were still underfoot, but they were laid with a precision that spoke of deliberate design, not the haphazard wear of centuries. On either side, the buildings rose in a stately, uniform rhythm. They were not the towering, 10-story tenements of the old town, but elegant, symmetrical Georgian townhouses, their facades of golden sandstone glowing softly under the pale sunlight. Each door, each window, each line of the intricate ironwork was placed with a sense of purpose and harmony. This was architecture built on the principles of reason and classical proportion, a physical representation of the very ideals of the Enlightenment. I found myself in a grand square, a vast open space designed for both beauty and utility. In the center, a manicured lawn was surrounded by an iron fence, with a few trees beginning to take root. This was not a crowded market or a place for public executions, but a space for quiet contemplation and leisurely strolling. I could already see a few figures, a gentleman with a newspaper and a lady with a small dog taking a peaceful turn around the perimeter. Their movements were not hurried or anxious, but calm and deliberate, as if they were a natural part of this orderly landscape. The contrast with the teeming, unpredictable energy of the Royal Mile was immense. The silence here was a different kind of silence. It was not the profound historical quiet of the castle or the muted solitude of the morning mist. This was the quiet of deliberate order, of a well-behaved society. The sounds were few and far between. The distant clatter of a carriage, the soft rustle of a page being turned, the low murmur of conversation that was never allowed to rise to a shout. It was the sound of a new, more refined way of life, one that valued tranquility and thoughtful discussion over boisterous energy. I ran my hand over the smooth, cool surface of a building's facade, feeling the clean, precise lines of the stone. This was not the ancient, rough-hewn stone of the castle, worn by 1,000 battles. This was fresh, new, and beautiful, a testament to the skill of the masons and the ambition of the city's leaders. The very materials of the new town felt infused with the glow of optimism, a sense of a future that was being built from the ground up, one perfect stone at a time. I imagined what it must feel like to live here, to have clean air, open space, and a sense of order, to be a part of a community that was defined not by the close, chaotic proximity of its tenements, but by the broad, shared vistas of its streets and squares. This was a city designed for the future, and its grandeur was not just a matter of size or wealth, but a matter of philosophical intent. My walk had now brought me to a place where I could stand in the new town and look back towards the old town. From here, the ancient city appeared as a magnificent, romantic, but ultimately chaotic backdrop. Its towering tenements and narrow closes, once so immediate and overwhelming, were now a distant, beautiful silhouette against the sky. The old world was no longer underfoot. It was a memory on the horizon. And in front of me, stretching out in elegant, rational lines, was the future. The sun, now at its zenith, finally broke through the clouds, bathing the golden sandstone in a warm, clear light. The new town, in that moment, seemed to shimmer with the brilliance of the ideas that had conceived it. The quiet walk had taken me from the historical past to the promising present, a silent journey through a city that was not just growing, but evolving. One beautiful, grand street at a time. Leaving the stately order of the new town's grand squares, I was drawn towards its southern edge, where the elegant avenues abruptly gave way to a different kind of landscape. The air, which had been clean and fresh, now carried a heavier, more pungent scent, the earthy, damp aroma of a marsh. My walk had brought me to the vast, empty space that lay between the new town and the towering crag of the old. This was the bed of the Nor Loch, a foul and stagnant body of water that was now, in the 1770s, being slowly and deliberately drained. This was not a garden, as the name would one day suggest, but a raw, messy, and profoundly transitional space. I stood on the edge of what would become Prince's Street, looking out over the exposed mud and marsh grass. The squelch and suck of the draining loch were the dominant sounds, a soft, constant noise that spoke of a landscape in the process of transformation. The scent of decaying organic matter and damp soil was strong, a visceral reminder of the centuries of filth and neglect that had defined this space. It was a stark and humbling contrast to the grandeur I had just witnessed, a powerful dose of reality for a city that was building itself on the principles of reason and beauty. The view was a breathtaking, if unsettling one. To my left, the clean, uniform lines of the new Georgian townhouses stood proud and pristine. To my right, rising dramatically from the mess of the lock bed, were the ancient, chaotic foundations of the old town, their tenement windows stacked one on top of the other, their closes like dark cuts in the stone. It was a view that captured the very essence of Edinburgh at this moment. The old and the new, the beautiful and the squalid standing in stark relief against each other. I walked slowly along the muddy edge, my boots sinking slightly with each step, feeling the weight of this in-between place. The quiet here was not the hushed tranquility of a library, but the stillness of a battlefield after the fight. A place where the old order had been vanquished and the new had not yet been fully established. The wind, which had felt so optimistic in the new town, now felt more like a cleansing force, carrying away the old smells and the old ideas, making room for something new. I noticed a few figures in the distance, laborers in rough clothes, moving slowly across the marshy ground. They were the physical agents of this change, the quiet workers who were literally laying the groundwork for the city's future. Their work, though difficult and dirty, felt profoundly significant. They were draining the dregs of the medieval city, clearing away the mess of the past to create a space for the leisure and beauty of the future. It was a powerful act, a tangible expression of the Enlightenment's belief in progress. I found a quiet spot on a low, rocky outcrop and simply watched. The sky was still a uniform gray, but there was a promise of a break in the clouds. I imagined what this space would become. Not a muddy lock, but a series of beautiful, manicured gardens. I envisioned broad, green lawns where families would stroll, and elegant pathways where scholars would walk, their conversations unmarred by the sight and smell of decay. That future was still a distant dream, but the very act of draining the lock made it feel tangible, a promise that was slowly, patiently being fulfilled. The quiet moment at the Nor Lock was a profound counterpoint to the city's grander narratives. It was a reminder that progress is not always clean or beautiful. It is often a messy, difficult, and laborious process. It requires the courage to clear away the old and the vision to see the potential in the new. This quiet moment, standing between two worlds, was a journey into the city's profound commitment to change. It was a pilgrimage to a place where the past was being buried and the future was being born, one squelching, muddy step at a time. My journey, having traversed the intellectual heart of the university and the optimistic promise of the new, now took a more reflective turn. Leaving the messy, transitional space of the Nor Lock, I began to retrace my steps eastward along the Royal Mile, but with a different purpose. The city was now fully awake, and the street, once a place of quiet solitude, was bustling with the sounds of commerce and daily life. My goal was not the crowded tenements or the bustling coffee houses, but the Royal Mile's ancient terminus, Holyrood Palace. As I walked, the atmosphere began to shift subtly, leaving the busy heart of the city behind. The crowds thinned, The buildings became less tall and imposing, and the street began to descend more gently. The air, which had been heavy with the scents of the city, now grew fresher, carrying the scent of grass and open space. The sense of solitude, which had been a fleeting sensation in the morning mist, now became a profound and deliberate reality. This was a pilgrimage to a different kind of heart, the royal and often tragic past of Scotland. Holyrood Palace, as it came into view, was a study in contrasts. It was not the unyielding, martial presence of the castle, but a more elegant, more domestic, and yet no less historically significant structure. Its grand facades and intricate windows seemed to gaze out over a long, sweeping lawn, a pastoral setting that was a world away from the crowded tenements of the old town. The sound here was one of profound quietude, broken only by the distant caw of a rook or the gentle rustle of the wind. I walked slowly along the low stone wall that bordered the palace grounds, feeling the weight of the history within. This was the place of kings and queens, of royal births and political intrigues, of joyous celebrations and brutal murders. The ghost of Mary Queen of Scots felt palpable here, her story of love, power, and tragedy etched into the very stones of the palace. I imagined her, a beautiful, tragic figure, walking these same grounds, her hopes and fears as real as my own. The palace itself, though magnificent, felt a little lonely, a little isolated. In the 1770s, it was no longer the primary residence of the Scottish monarchy, which had been merged with the English crown. It was a palace in waiting, a grand and beautiful symbol of a past that was both glorious and gone. Its very existence was a quiet, poignant reminder of a political union that had forever changed the course of Scotland's history. I moved closer to the grand entrance, its intricate carvings and royal symbols a testament to its former glory. I ran my hand over the cool, rough surface of the stone, feeling a profound connection to the countless royal hands that had done the same. The history here was not just a story, it was a physical presence, a weight that settled on the very air. The gardens surrounding the palace, though not the manicured lawns of the new town, were wild and beautiful, a natural counterpoint to the stone walls of the city. The scent of damp grass and wild herbs was strong, and the sound of birdsong was a constant, gentle accompaniment. This was a place for quiet reflection, a space where the noise and chaos of the city faded away, leaving only the profound stillness of history. As the day progressed, the sky grew a little brighter, but the air remained cool and still. The view from Holyrood, looking back up the Royal Mile, was a powerful one. The street, which had once been the center of the world, now appeared as a long, ascending corridor, leading away from the peaceful solitude of the palace and back into the bustling, intellectual ferment of the city. The solitary stroll to Holyrood Palace was a humbling end to my day's journey. It was a pilgrimage to the very soul of Scotland's past, a place that, even in its quietude, spoke volumes about the nation's identity and its enduring legacy. This quiet walk, in this quiet place, was a profound encounter with the profound stillness of history, a place where the grandeur of the past and the promise of the future met in a silent, beautiful conversation. The day's journey, a silent pilgrimage through the heart of a city in transition, was nearing its end. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the western sky with strokes of gold and crimson, I began my final ascent. My path took me away from the quiet solitude of Holyrood and towards the unmistakable rise of Calton Hill, a sentinel overlooking the entire city. The air, which had grown cool and still, now felt crisp and clear, as if the elevation had cleansed it of the day's sounds and scents. The walk up the hill was a gentle climb, but with each step, the city unfolded below me, a vast and complex tapestry of stone and history. The sounds of Edinburgh, once so immediate and overwhelming, now faded into a distant, continuous hum, a low, rhythmic pulse that was the sound of a city at rest. Up here, the wind was a different kind of presence. It was not the powerful, assertive force of the castle crag, but a quiet, thoughtful breeze, whispering through the sparse grass and the ancient stone. I found a quiet spot near the base of the unfinished National Monument, its solitary, classical columns, a poignant reminder of both the city's ambition and its financial limitations. From here, the view was breathtaking. Spread out below me was the entire panorama of Edinburgh, a perfect, silent study in contrasts. To the left, the dark, towering silhouette of the old town rose from its rocky spine, its tenements encloses a chaotic, magnificent jumble of history. To the right, the clean, elegant lines of the new town stretched out in an orderly grid, its broad avenues and symmetrical squares a promise of a future built on reason and design. The light of twilight was the final and most profound narrator of this story. The setting sun cast a warm, golden glow over the new town, illuminating its fresh, golden sandstone and making its elegant lines shimmer with a hopeful radiance. At the same time, the old town was beginning to fall into shadow, its ancient stone facades taking on a dark, almost brooding quality. The castle, a mighty sentinel from the morning, was now a powerful silhouette against the last rays of the sun, a beautiful but fading symbol of a long-ago era. I stood for a long time, watching as the city transitioned from the light of day to the quiet of night. The first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, small, brilliant pinpricks of light in a universe that seemed to watch over the city's profound transformation. The scent of damp stone and the fresh, cool air of the high ground filled my lungs, a final, sensory reminder of my journey. The quiet of Calton Hill was a profound and spiritual one. It was not the quiet of solitude, but the stillness of a deep and complete understanding. From this vantage point, I could see the city not as a series of disconnected places, but as a single, living entity, a conversation between the past and the future. I could feel the weight of its history, the power of its ideas, and the promise of its ambition, all held together in a silent, beautiful conversation. My quiet walk, which had begun in the misty solitude of the Royal Mile, had now reached its final destination. It was a pilgrimage, not just through the city, but through a moment in time, a journey into the heart of a revolution. And now, from the silent heights of Calton Hill, I could see it all: the grand, chaotic past and the elegant, hopeful future, held together in a single, beautiful, and profoundly quiet moment. The quiet of twilight was the final note of this journey, a soft, perfect end to a day of profound discovery. And so, our quiet walk through the ancient and modern worlds of Edinburgh comes to a gentle close. The echoes of history, the whispers of new ideas, and the profound beauty of a city in transition now fade into the stillness of the night. Rest easy. The rabbit hole of time holds many more slow steps. Until we meet again, Silas is signing off.